Author Salman Rushdie is alive but breathing through a ventilator after being stabbed on stage as he was about to give a lecture in New York State. Rushdie had spent years in hiding and under police protection after Iranian leaders called for his execution over his 1988 novel, The Satanic Verses. A 24-year-old man has been taken into custody.
Panic as a man rushes the stage and attacks Salman Rushdie as he's about to speak. The author fell to the ground. Police say he was stabbed in the neck. His assailant was tackled and taken into custody.
People who were on the stage with him immediately rushed to the attacker, and people jumped onto the stage from the audience to the point where there were probably 20 people on stage pulling the attacker off and keeping him contained. And there happened to be at least 4 physicians in the audience who were able to come up on stage and help.
The author was transported to hospital via helicopter. The attack happened as he was about to deliver an address about artists living in exile under threat of persecution in Western New York.
He is alive. He has been transported, airlifted to safety. But here's an individual who has spent decades speaking truth to power, someone who's been out there unafraid, despite the threats that have followed him his entire adult life, it seems.
Rushdie was forced to spend more than a decade in hiding after the release of his 1988 novel, The Satanic Verses, provoked protests by Muslims in several countries, and the supreme leader of Iran called for his execution. The 75-year-old author has long been a vocal critic of religious extremism and a champion of free speech. The motive for the attack is not yet known.
Our culture editor, Scott Roxborough, joins me now from Cologne. Scott, I want to stress that we don't yet have a motive for this attack, but people will no doubt wonder whether it's in fact related to the Satanic Verses. So remind us what the book is about.
Yes, thanks. I think a lot of people talk about Satanic Verses without really knowing what it's about, because I think it's a book more famous than read, especially now since it's many decades old. The book itself is not primarily about religion or Islam. It's a story of 2 Indian expats living in London who miraculously survive a terrorist attack. And like a lot of Rushdie's work, it's a satire, and it's very fantastic. There's sort of magically realistic elements throughout the book. What caused offense at the time, and still does for some people, are dream sequences, which are in the book, which are sort of retellings of the traditional story of the life of the Prophet Muhammad. And many Muslims at the time took great offense to that, saying it was an insult to their religion. And that is what sparked protests against the book at the time and led to the Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran's spiritual leader, calling for a fatwa, a religious edict, calling for the death of Salman Rushdie.
How was outrage over the book manifest back when it was released 30 years ago?
Yeah, it's for people who didn't live through it, it's hard to imagine the outrage that came at the time. It initially actually started not in Iran, but in India, Salman Rushdie's home country, where the book was banned. There were riots, books were burned, a number of people were killed in riots at the time. And then the protests spread around the Muslim world, and the book was banned in many countries. And I say leading up to then the religious edict by the supreme leader, religious leader of Iran, calling for Rushdie to be killed. He himself survived several assassination attempts, and people connected with the book were also attacked. The Japanese translator of the Satanic Verses was stabbed to death. The Norwegian publisher of the book was shot and nearly killed, and Rushdie himself had to go into hiding and be under police protection for nearly a decade, living under the pseudonym Joseph Anton. He published later a memoir in the words based on his experiences at that time, called Joseph Anton. It was an unbelievable attack, many would say, on freedom of speech, and of course transformed Rushdie's life and his persona as a sort of literary celebrity, because he became not only a celebrated author but a symbol of the defense of free speech against extremism of all forms.
That's our Scott Roxbauer. Many, many thanks, Scott.